Hey guys, welcome to another video. Today I want to talk about soldering. Soldering is a topic that we haven't really talked about too much in the past, mostly because I wasn't comfortable showing you my setup, my tools, the way I do things. Only as of like yesterday did I actually get everything to the point where I'm comfortable showing. So let's start right at the very top. What is being done industry-wide right now in terms of soldering? Well, it's not really considered soldering anymore. It's more like welding. The big machines that are used, the big industrial ones, are lasers. They're very, very powerful. They work on one tiny little spot at a time. They produce almost no heat. They are a great tool, but they're very, very expensive. So they're kind of out of the range of most jewelers beginning, or even those who are established. Maybe they don't have a laser. The next one down from that, I believe, would be called a PUK. Now, I don't really know what PUK stands for, but there are companies like Orion and Lampert that are making these tools. And they're essentially like a micro TIG machine. TIG stands for tungsten inert gas, and it's more welding. Essentially, it's a little electrode. You're surrounding the material with an argon shielding, so there's no oxidation, and you're using electricity to zap and fuse those things together that you want to attach. The more common method of soldering would be with a gas, basically burning in combination with oxygen most times, either acetylene, propane, or MAP gas. I personally went the propane method because propane is very, very cheap currently, and it's readily available. However, if you're even starting out even smaller than that, you can get away with little baby torches like this. This is my old Blazer. This is kind of what I started out with. It doesn't work anymore, but this is a very solid little butane torch. However, these torches are great in a very small space because this is all what you need. It's just a small little unit. It's on when you need it. Otherwise, it's always off. They're very small. You can go buy the refill canisters at the hardware store very cheaply. So this is a great place to start. But I guarantee this will never be the last torch that you want. I also really like just plain plumber's torches. This is like a camp cylinder propane thing. I find these ones are a little bit cheaper than the long blue ones. There's a little bit more in these ones, and I think they're actually a little bit cheaper. I have the Benzomatic TS4000. Strongly recommend this torch itself. Very, very robust, automatic click-on. Great torch. There's others that are cheaper. I think this one's in the $60-ish range. Well worth every penny, no joke. And you can also buy attachments for the bottom to go into a hose connection rather than have the tank right on the bottom. I like to use this torch for when I'm working with big projects. Like maybe you saw on our channel previously, we did a great big bracelet, like a 400-gram silver bracelet cuff. I used this torch a lot because I had to produce a lot of heat and get it into the silver so that it would actually solder together. However, for more of the finesse work, I like to use the Smith little torch. The Smith has been one of those torches that's just been around for years and years. It works, it's solid, it's reliable, it's variable. You have different tip options. It works with all gases, very versatile torch. But aside from the Smith little torch, there's also like the Orca, there's the Midget torch, the Hoke, Swiss. There's a few others, I'm sure, but I just don't know them off the top of my head. All great torches. I would strongly recommend, if you have the space and the budget and the ventilation, I suppose, I would strongly recommend going with a fuel oxygen setup. And the reason for that is heat. Again, you get so much more heat, so much more control. The tanks, depending on the size you get, can last years at a time, and the refills are relatively cheap. So let's go look at my soldering station and I'll show you guys a little bit more about what I mean. So this is our soldering station, and it's a little bit of a mess right now. Most soldering stations don't stay clean for very long, in my case anyway, and we have pretty much everything you need in this little spot. Now I am planning on expanding this area. I have another one of these steel boxes that I made It's actually just over here currently. This is the rough one. This is the first one, and then this one was the second one. This one's in much better shape. Anyway, we're gonna put another one of those right here, and then the casting machine is gonna go live on a table down here somewhere. So it's gonna kind of shift over, and then we'll have 2 soldering station spots, because as I wanna do bench rentals, soldering stations tend to be kind of like a choke point, where if there's more than one person wanting to work, you can't because there's only one station. So anyway, it's easy to do it this way because of the tanks that I have. This is a 5-pound propane tank, about as small as you can get. And this is, I believe, called a V60 oxygen tank. I'm not entirely sure how they rate these. And I think that the naming scheme actually changes depending on the country you're in. But anyway, this is not the smallest size oxygen tank that you can get. I believe it's the second smallest. Anyway, so from this tank and this, I've managed to get more than 6 months worth of use. I have the Smith light duty regulator going to a flashback arrestor. These are a necessary thing, and I will explain them later. To a splitter that has their own shutoff valves. And then both of those go into a torch. So I actually have 2 Smith little torches. This is an older one, and you'll notice that the knobs are on the wrong side. I think this is like a lefty, or maybe it was just really old. I'm not really sure. Anyway, I have 2 Smith little torches. They both work great. And then it's pretty much the same thing with the oxygen tank. This goes from a flashback arrestor to a splitter, and then it goes on. Just something I have to note is that just having these freestanding here, this is not how you store tanks. You have to have them attached to a solid object like a wall. So what I'm going to do is bind these together with that bungee cord, and then I will be chaining them both to the wall right in the middle, so that when someone sits at the station here, they've got a lot of leg room, and then over here, similar type of thing, and these tanks are right in the middle. So let's talk about some of the other things that we need for soldering. Well, first of all, you need the solder. Solder comes in three different levels, and they are marked right here on the bottom. So this is easy. This one's medium with an M. And this one is hard, marked with an H. The difference between them is pretty simple. This one flows at the lowest temperature, that's easy. Medium is a mixture of the both, and this one is the highest temperature. Basically what you do to make solder is melt down silver and add brass. And the more brass you add, the lower the temperature is required to make it melt. So in other words, with hard, it has the highest silver content, it has the highest melting temperature, it's going to be the most strong version of solder. And the other reason why you have 3 different kinds is simply because when I go to solder a ring, say in different levels, I've got the band with its solder point, and then maybe I want to solder on like a stone setting, and then on the top of that stone setting, maybe there's something else. The point of that is that you start with the hardest, the highest melt temperature, and you work your way down, so that when you do your soldering, the next step, you don't undo what you just did. Obviously, these sheets are not really useful as they are now. You can see I've kind of been chipping away at them. You can get special little nippers, like cutter things, and essentially you cut them into little chips. These are pretty big chips. Most of the time you will need something a quarter this size, and that's actually what I've done for these ones down here. For easy, I don't do a whole lot of chains, so I have some bigger ones. I just needed some bigger pieces. But this is a very simple little system I have for organizing them. They're readily available, they won't get lost, and it's easy to separate them. Now this solder also comes in wire form, very simple, and you can kind of denominate which one is which with a symbol on the end. So you just kind of bend this one into a square. This is hard. Medium is a triangle. and then easy as a circle. So moving on to the pad itself. This is just a piece of solderite pad on a little wheel. It's very simple. You can flip these up and down. This one's got some grooves and it's also flat on the other side. These are called third hands. Essentially, you can't touch what you're soldering. It's too hot with your hands. So you use a tool like this in conjunction with the third hands to pick up your solder and put it on top of your pieces. Third hands just help you position things exactly the way you want it so that when it's soldered, it's done. It's held perfectly and it makes it nice and easy. These solder picks are made out of titanium. Well, it's actually just the end here that's made of titanium. This is just an aluminum. You can get them in multiple colors. So if you're working with multiple people, you don't get mixed up, or maybe you use them for different types of metal. You can use one for silver. You could use a different color for gold and different carats of gold. It depends on how much you want to go. But anyway, this is a solder pick. You kind of just heat up little balls. You pick it up, put it where you want it. Something else you should have are tweezers. These are, not really sure what the proper name for these tweezers are, but basically they're like self-tightening, so you squish them to open rather than something like this where you squish to hold. Having both, actually having a whole pile of them is really good. I have more than this even, just elsewhere sitting, and they're just useful to have for holding little bits of solder, picking up little pieces. It's always good to have extra ones for your third hand, for holding other pieces. Maybe you have like, a whole rig of them going. You could have one holding a component and another and another and another, and this one's holding the ring. Could be a whole thing. So to make the solder flow with the flame, you need to have very clean metal. And to achieve that, you need what's called flux. Flux is just a fluid, like so. This is like a nuclear slime green color. This one is self-pickling. And what that basically means is it kind of has a cleaning action on the metal, as well as keeping it nice and clear during the actual heating process. There's also these blue ones that you can get. This was given to me in a very old bundle of jeweler's tools. I have this one and then the really old Vigor brand one. They're all virtually the same. They're good for pretty much everything. Does not contain cyanide. I didn't know I had to be concerned if it had cyanide in it. A little bit disconcerting, but doesn't have cyanide, it says it. So anyway, you need to have a flux or your metal will not solder. It just simply will not work. So once you're done, you're soldering with your flux and it's flowed, your metal's gonna look a little dirty. What you need to do to clean that off is put it in what's called pickle. Pickle it's a funny word, but it's actually an acid, a very, very light acid. It doesn't look like much. It's just hot water, really, with some of this stuff in it. This is called Sparex. Sparex is basically pH down. You can put this in a granular form into the crock pot, heat it up, and it will just dissolve, and it lowers the pH. And essentially, it just makes all that oxidation dissolve away, but it doesn't remove any other metal whatsoever. This is just a chemical cleaning process that caps off your soldering. Aside from that, there's also a few safety things that you have to consider with soldering. Obviously, you're going to be working with a flame. So your flame, if you have it on like a little magnetic thing like this, is going to be shooting off into what? Is it going to be shooting off against your drywall and burning your place down? Or it should be going up against something metal. Ideally, the metal's going to get hot, so ideally you should have something else in front of it. Tile works. These are fire bricks. There's other levels of fire bricks. These are the most expensive ones. They're whipped, they're very light. They can take a lot of heat, but there's other fire bricks that are less expensive and would do the same kind of job for this purpose. Basically, these are just an insulator so that you can work and it won't burn anything down. Aside from the heat aspect, you need to worry about fumes as well. Fumes generally come from the flux, but they're also coming from the fact that it's burning a gas as well, carbon monoxide. I don't have the greatest little hood system here, but this is just a little thing from Eurotool. This is a carbon filter underneath. and a fan, turn it on, and it just kind of pulls the steam and the smoke away from your face, and it generally filters it. Now, I don't think this is by any means the best solder, like fume hood system at all. This just kind of works for my current setup. What I'd like someday is like a proper HEPA filtered carbon, everything from like Quattro. Maybe it can come up from one side and go to the other. A proper setup that does better filtering. But this is better than nothing. For now, this is what I can afford, so this is what I have. I recommend getting one of these if you're just starting out. You could even one-up me very easily and have just a fan, like a piece of duct tubing or something that goes outside. If you want to get into proper ventilation, going outside is always the best. Not trying to recirculate and filter the air. In some cases, you actually have to, and this tool up here is kind of the mother of all recirculation filters. This is actually for my burnout hood, for my burnout kiln, and it's actually sucking up the fumes from that and then recirculating them back into the room. But there's like massive 2-inch carbon filters. Actually, there's multiple filters in that box, and it does a really good job. Anyway, back to soldering. So ventilation is very important. Protect yourself and anyone else that you're working with. This is probably the bare basics, but you should, if you can, always go for bigger, better, because safety and health is very important in jewelry. So the torch itself, I have the Smith Little torch. I really like it. I've had this one for a number of years. It's starting to show its wear and tear. They're very solid and simple. I like the knobs. They're just easy. The tips are easy to change. This is the number 7 that I have on here. It's the largest. This one's the number 4, and this goes down to a number 2. And inside that little hole is a tiny little sapphire or a ruby. I'm not really sure. It's a stone of some kind, some synthetic stone. And essentially that helps make a very micro flame. Like this one's pretty big. I'll show you in a second. The number 2 is very, very tiny. It's more like, watch working scale. But even then, I don't think really watchmakers use this kind of torch. So, and then lastly, to cap it off, to light your torch, there's a couple of methods. This is called a flint striker. There's a little piece of flint just there on the bottom. I think this is actually really worn out. And then a piece of steel. And this just kind of ignites the propane. Like that. But I treated myself and I got this. This is called an auto igniter by Akoi. I bought it from Pepe Tools though. And it's very simple. You just kind of open your gas and you just press down. And essentially what that does is it makes a little spark between here and that little center thing there. And just makes a little spark. So this is definitely kind of like a luxury thing. You definitely don't need one of those. I think this was like a $50 tool. It's just kind of nice for me. Going hands-free sometimes is such a help. Being able to just go like click, okay, I'm working. Or maybe I've got, a whole rig of things going on and I just can't let it go. Just being able to use this is really nice. And never having to buy those little flints again is really great. I just kind of have to change the batteries. I don't know how long the batteries will last in this, but I've heard years is not uncommon. Considering how often I use this and like how much energy is expended from just that little spark, I think it could last a long time. So that's pretty much the soldering station. You have to be very careful with soldering. Never, ever, ever work in a small apartment space with tanks like this. There's just no way you're going to get insured for it. Make sure you're doing things properly. Protect yourself with ventilation. Have good lighting. Protect your walls and your space, everything. There's a lot to consider with soldering. To do it properly, you do need to invest in good tools. A butane torch will get you so far, but to have the true versatility and the robust kind of soldering that you need to do for some jewelry, having a space like this is necessary, unfortunately. So that's all I really have to say about soldering. Thank you very much for watching. This is my setup. This is not the only setup. There are other tools that you can use, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, like lasers, PUKs, the butane torches do have some use. There's also options where it's just gas, no oxygen, so that can help with insurance purposes. There's options galore, but this is what I have. This is what works. There's a number of things in here that I strongly recommend you take into consideration, even if the torch is different or your setup looks a little different. So that's all. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you guys in the next video.